So hi everyone, welcome back for another installment of Manager IQ's Manager Interview Series. We come together here so that we can get managers talking about their experience so we can learn and grow from them. So we're very excited to have another session here. We've got Rueben Sharples, who's from New Zealand, and he's everyone's favourite local butcher, and no one knows meat better than Rueben. He's the managing director of Aussie Butcher in New Lynn and is an active member of the wider Aussie Butcher franchise. Ruben's 28-year career began as an apprentice in Waipu, where he then moved into Auckland and finished his trade, and then went into the big bad world and had a little bit of experience here in London, but at a famous Smithfield market, so that must have been quite exciting. On his return back to Auckland, Rueben continued his journey, and before long he set up his own Newmarket Aussie butcher shop, and then set up another butcher shop in Newland, where he's had the store for 8 years and has spent 11 years in the Aussie Butcher Group. He appreciates the early input into his career from his own bosses and is so committed to the importance of training and mentoring younger talent, which is so fantastic to hear. To date, 4 apprentices have now qualified under his tutelage. His apprentice, Ben Nelson, even took out the Auckland Regional Competition last year, where Rueben is also the judge at the Young Butchers Competition. Rueben is also known for competing and winning in the competitions, including the regular medalist in the Devereux Sausage Competition, where he has won 6 gold awards as well. My mouth is kind of watering, talking and thinking about these sausages, Rueben. But you've also represented the North Island in the 2014 North versus South Butchery, won the New Zealand Best Ham in 2017, and New Zealand's Best Butcher in the same year. You've also won countless awards in your own brand of meats called Ruben's, which specialises in award-winning small goods and especially delicious sausages. Rueben isn't just active within the world of butchery, but he also spends numerous hours investing and giving back to your community. Rueben and his family are proud supporters and fundraisers of the Child Cancer Foundation and regularly gets involved with the campaigns to raise vital funds for their incredible work. Rueben also gets involved in local level with numerous different sponsorships and donations to schools, sports teams, and even is the proud partner of the Kindness Collective Foundation. Through this foundation, Ruben's work has resulted in over $100,000 worth of quality meat being donated through various organisations. During COVID-19, in the lockdowns in 2020 and 2021, when Rueben was faced with the huge devastation of not being able to trade, he opened up the store for the Kindness Collective to take what they needed for families, doing it tough before the country was plunged into lockdown. As a result of this, Ruben's generosity, over 3,000 families were fed. That's such an amazing thing to do for the local community. If that wasn't enough, Rueben is a member of Hellas Sharp Blacks, is a director on the Retail Meat Board and the New Zealand Pork Board. His Newland store is also Google's #1 voted best butcher in the country. I think that's my most amazing intro yet, Rueben. It's so excited to have you here. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Good.
That's good. That's good. And I was mentioning when we were getting ready for this interview that I was really excited about coming and joining a conversation with you because your background and my background is so different. And it's really exciting to be talking to different leaders and managers who've had different experience outside of the corporate world. So thank you for taking the time to share your with us. So tell me, Rueben, a little bit about, I guess, your career, which relates to, when you first became a manager and that experience to date.
It's probably like almost sort of shops that I sort of started working in were small shops, like sort of one-on-one. So if the boss wasn't there, I was sort of running sort of shop. So, and that sort of, I suppose it's you would sort of put in the deep end. So to customers are coming in, you're having to sort of make those management decisions on what people are like ordering or doing things like that. I always I don't mind sort of voicing up and sort of voicing my opinion and saying things whether it's right or whether it's wrong. But I sort of think that helps when it sort of comes to it, sort of understanding your staff and things. And then as the shops, I've sort of grown sort of slowly, like we had a 2-man shop and then, working up to 5, and we've got a team now of 16.
Oh, wow.
So in a 7-day-a-week business, I've got 1 main manager, and then there's probably a couple of other people under that if the manager's not there, somebody else knows how to step it up. So, yeah.
Wow. From just the 2 of you to 2 to 4 to 6 to 16. That's like a large job. That's fantastic. When you were thinking, I guess, when you started having this much larger, group of people that you were responsible for, did you see a shift in what you needed to focus on from a leader's perspective?
Yeah, I was very sort of like hands-on, trying to micromanage. And when
Mm.
we had the Newmarket shop, it was people would come in as Rueben there, and if I was having a day off, then they would sort of walk out, and or they wanted to be served by me. So I realised that when I went to the new Lynn shop, I had to sort of train that it wasn't just me. So
Mm.
customers came in, they knew that the staff were just as good and confident in doing things. So I'm always trying to explain to people that, you know, if someone comes in and asks for a pork belly, it's asking them people like what they want. If you haven't got it, actually say, hey, what are you going to use this with? And then
Mm.
you might be able to use a pork shoulder instead or something like that. So I found that you sort of had to be showing these young people coming through and sort of teaching them sort of, I suppose it's like management skills, so to speak. It's
Mm.
not, we're very like it's chalk and cheese, you know, our two industries. That's the
Mm.
sort of thing. Like I'm not really that sort of structured in that way. But
Mm.
I've found that now is like as the years on, I'm sort of more in front of a computer trying to organize things and doing all the ordering and
Mm.
that sort of having the shop run by it. So if people if someone rings up, I always ask a question like, say, hey, what do you think we should order? And I'll ask
Mm.
all the team. And even if I've got that number in my head already, it's getting their input. So then so they might say, oh, we need 10 cartons of that. And I say, well, hang on, it's on special next week. Do you think we should get 15? Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So it's sort of just,
Mm.
you're sort of training, but you're not training. Like that's the sort of way I do things, and it's worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like it just happens organically, so it's not about necessarily, and this is what a lot of organizations think, that they have to provide all of these development and these training courses and so forth. But what they don't understand is that the value of on-the-job experience and people also giving people the ability to be autonomous in their decisions or have an opinion or really understanding why you're making decisions is actually even more powerful than those probably training that they've had.
Yeah, and we don't like I've sort of looked at doing courses myself, but it's yeah, I've just you sort of learned from organically
Mm.
and if the staff can do it at 90% correct, then and me not have to be there, then that's good. It's just
Mm.
sort of hopefully the 10% isn't a major problem, but most of it's not. Like I'm really lucky with the team that we've got, and most of
Hmm.
them have been there for at least 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's good.
And so over the years, I guess, to engage and continue to have people want to work with you and continue to be under your leadership, I mean, are there some things that you have done to support them, or, how do you help continue to keep them engaged, I guess?
Yeah, yeah, whether it's I'll always sort of trying to like if they need help or like I've had some people leave and start up their own. You know, my managers that I previous have left and start up their own butchery. I've probably
Mm.
had probably about four that have done that. Which sometimes you think, oh, you put all that time and effort into them, but I mean it's exactly the same as when I was young. Like it's good. I think it's growing the industry. So you want
Mm.
people like. If any of my workers were to come to me now, if my manager said, hey, I want to set up my own shop, I'd make sure that's good and say, yeah, how about I help you invest in that or,
Mm.
give them along because it's the growth. You don't want to have people just, I mean, it's lovely that they will stay.
Yeah.
That's look after them well. So they don't look at the grass is always greener.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want people to sort of go out and sort of and learn things. Is when I sort of started when I learned my stepdad said to me, you can either be a tortoise and put your head out, and each time
Mm.
danger comes, you pull it in, or you can go out there and leave your head out, and it might get
Mm.
chopped off, but you're going to learn from that, and that's sort of how I sort of looked at it. Sometimes you've got to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's done us well.
Yeah, good. Well, congratulations. Sounds like you've had an amazing experience, not just for you, but also for your people. What I loved about your blurb at the beginning as well is how you mentioned that you had a great experience, I think, with your first boss that helped you, I guess, role model some of those things that made you want to, make sure that you got more apprentices or get apprentices through their apprenticeship. So talk me a little bit through that experience and how it kind of defined you.
Yeah, I suppose it's like I still talk to all my bosses. Like I still ring up my first one, Larry. I'll call past him up at Waipu. Got Alan and I still ring up London. I
Mm.
ring up. It's I finished Christmas on the 24th of December. I when we finished, I always give them a phone call, and I haven't been what is it, 22 years now since I was last there, and I still ring up every single. It's their Christmas morning, and they'll say, "Well, it's Skippy on the phone," you know. So it's cool that I have that relationship with them, and that sort of helped along that way. So what was the question? I started waffling there a little bit.
No worries. I was just mentioning like how your original boss defined you, and particularly when you became a boss yourself and had that role modeling.
I think they've always sort of helped when I first went out and we bought my first shop. He wasn't ready to sell. I was always going to buy his shop, but we sort of built it up. So I was just going for a run when I bought the first shop in Coates Ave. Walked in there and bought it off this guy called John Smolesworth. And he helped. Even though old boss Alan, he knew that I might take some people off from him, but he was there to support me, knowing that. And it does, and it was really good. I could ring him up and say, hey, this is the problem, or this is how you do the accounts. So he was showing me how to do the GPs and things like that. And that's sort of what I still do it to this day. I'll say to anyone, like, I've got a friend up at Mangawai, and I'll sort of help them looking at different ways of how you can make more money. Because if you want people to succeed, like I've always sort of, it's me. I've always felt when I was an apprentice and I'd look outside at Ring Mirror and there's a Ferrari out there, and I was never going, man, I was like, how can I get one of those? And like, so it's sort of, and that's the sort of the way you want people to do. And that's what our franchisor as well wants us. Like we've got all of us sort of fairly young people when we came on and bought into the Aussie Butcher, but he wants us to succeed. He wants us to have nice things, and you get that from working, and there's a lot of support there. And that's sort of why I do, like, I'm vice president now and retail meat board. So it's sort of helping other smaller shops, and through this COVID and understanding how you can growing growing sort of shop. So that's sort of, I don't know, it swings and roundabouts. And that's what a lot of people have helped me. And that's why I always sort of put out there and sort of help younger people as well. So.
Yeah. And I was reading this thing and listening to podcasts, as I do to try and just keep myself current. But there's a lot of information that when a person becomes a leader or a manager, they think I've made it, and I've got everyone that's working for me and they're going to do what I say, and I've got that. But in reality, it's actually quite a servitude kind of role. You're actually serving others, and you're serving your people, and you're big in serving your industry and just helping people in general. So it's a very different mindset. And I think that even if anyone who listens to this conversation takes that away from this conversation, I think that's quite powerful. It's around how can we help others succeed and thrive and get the things that they want and have the lifestyles that they want.
Yeah. And I think it's very hard. Like when you first take on to management, and it is really hard to sort of like say I was always younger. So when I worked for the Mad Butcher, and I was the manager of the back room, and there was older people that were under me, like literally double my age. And it was hard to explain, you're trying to tell someone that has got so much experience that you're still learning from, but you're the manager of them. So it's sort of trying to be able to, it's turning it off too when you can be friendship, or then when you have to be that boss. And that's I think for me, that's probably the hardest thing to do, is that you want to be friends with everyone, but sometimes you've got to do got to tell them off. A few years ago, we've increased in turnover nearly every year, but we came back from overseas, and the accountant pulled us in and said, hey, it's really great, you've increased your turnover by $500,000. It's like, oh, awesome. She goes, but it's your worst year you've ever had in profit. And we drove right into there looking at it, and it was only 2% that we were trying to find, but on our turnover it makes a big difference. And when we went in there, it was found it was just coming down to like wastage. So I had to then start to be telling people, rather than looking, going, oh, there's a little bit of meat on the bones. Oh, don't worry, we're sort of making right money. I don't want to have that discussion of trying to explain to people. But I went to Nigel Latter parenting, and he actually said it's harder to do the smacking than it is to be smacked. And I sort of thought, and I don't mean by smacking your kids, I just sort of like, it's harder to tell someone off, because when you get told off and you'll just sort of shrug it off. So I just started doing that and just sort of like, hey, explaining to people, you get that piece of meat, take it off the bone, put it on the scale, say it's $2. Okay, it's $2. How many legs of lamb do we do? Oh, you do 50. Okay, times that by 50. Now times that by 100. And I said, you've got that. That's, 2 times 50. So that's it can be like $1,000, $2,000. And that's just off one leg lamb. That's sort of explaining. So once you that was explaining to them that, and that's how you sort of did it. And that's what I do take that. It's it's the hardest thing of my job is when you have to do disciplinary actions. And I don't have an HR department. Like, I am HR. I am so it's everything. Like, problems that are coming to me, whether it be marital or, mortgage, or my car's broken down. It's it's coming on to me, and that's what and then that's where it's sort of hard. And that's probably the hardest thing. Like, sometimes you want to be their friends, but you actually have to, lay down the rules sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
I've struggled.
And it's a common thing as well, and through the Manager IQ's new manager development program, we do quite a bit with regards to having the difficult conversations or managing conflict and those sorts of things. And one of the key things is don't shy away from it, lean into it and realize that you're actually doing them a favor, because they will learn a lesson from that. You'll also understand a little bit more context, because usually if you're going in with a curious mindset, you understand, maybe they had a different cutting method, perhaps, that you didn't realize that they were having. I don't know your world, but I'm assuming that might be the case, and so forth. So it's a really powerful moment, and it could be a defining moment for them, because you could course correct a certain behavior. And I'm sure that lesson they'll learn for now and forever. And then even maybe when they have their own butcher shop, they'll know about, waste management because of these conversations that you've had with them.
Yeah, and it's just explaining. I always sort of try and put it into a story. That's how I will talk, trying to explain to them why they should do that. Like one of the young guys at the moment, he's at the end of the day, they might be it's everything's all cleaned up and they're standing around not doing much, but they're just serving the customers. And I said, look, you need to be sharpening your knife, because I said, you're going to be a very good butcher, and you can but the difference, you need to have sharp knives, because that will make you from being a good butcher to a great butcher. Because you're not going to be pushing the meat, you'll be cutting the meat. So just little things like that, and taking the time to showing them. So that's it makes it easier. So then if you're making the job easier, they feel better about themselves, because it is easy to do the whole thing. So it's I definitely you're always having to do things. You're always having to show them how to do things. And then when you got your managers now, he's not as much of a people person as me. So he struggles on that side of things, and that, it's like these guys might not be listening to him. So then you can't just, it's not about throwing your toys out of the cot. Like, our industry was like, you'd go off the deep end and, throw a few F-bombs around and that. But, everyone's a little bit precious now. But my number one thing of interviews, when we were small, I used to ask them what radio station to listen to. Yeah. And if they said a radio station that I personally didn't like, I nearly wouldn't give them a job, which is really this is going back quite a few years. But and that's because I knew that you had to. When we had a small team, we had to have everyone fit, and that's harder. And you'd find that yourself when you're working in an office, that you're getting all these people from all different walks of life, and different religions, different races, different upbringings, and where they're all based. And now you're trying to have to incorporate like this. So I've got these young guys that are 27 that love listening to the rock, and that's and then I've got the old ladies that have been with me for 10 years, 12 years, but they don't want to listen to this blaring music, and the customer does. So it's well, to 9 o'clock you can listen to this, and then we're going to this radio station from 9 to there, and it's so it's it's a juggling act, and that's trying to do it. So
And you know what, the one thing that I also think will just draw on a little bit more there is around how you've had to evolve as a leader and a manager given over time, because the world is changing. Like you said, that F-bombs and so forth were a thing of the the industry, or it was always said around the shop. And I think people have a lot better understanding around how powerful culture is, or the environment is, to themselves, and how it can actually impact it positively on the business as well. And and they've got more of a voice now as well. So, and I think that is I think it's great that the world is being challenged in lots of ways for it to evolve. But management and leadership, you need to kind of evolve with that. Like, even with COVID and Me Too, Black Lives Matters, like all of these things are coming into our environment and really changing the world at a more rapid pace than ever. And like when you talk about sharpening your tools with your team, as managers, we need to continue to do that as well. One, to keep up with what our people need and want and so forth. So we need to kind of continue to learn and grow. And if you can have that kind of development, curious mindset to management and leadership and go out and continue to learn, you're going to help evolve yourself as the world evolves around you. So it was just an interesting point that I picked up from your conversation before.
Yeah, I think and that's the sort of thing, like, we're in this weird world. I mean, you guys have had it hard, and we're now we're having our sort of stint of some, a lot of it, and there's been a lot of difference with, like, is everyone sort of vaccinated? And like, you're allowed to ask them, you can ask them if they're vaccinated, but they don't have to tell you that they're not vaccinated. So it's then now you're sort of getting this divide and the sort of hard, and then you've got customers that are coming in. So it's this really sort of different world that you're trying to keep everyone sort of safe and getting everyone to sort of understand. And I think that would be a great tool to be able to learn how to, you've got to be able to learn how to do this, because that's what's going to make you a great leader. Is to be able to you've got to look after your consumer, but then the other thing, you've got to look after your staff as well, because it's their family. And they're spending a lot of time, man. Like, you spend, like, my guys, some of them are doing 12 hours on certain days. And even if you spend a lot of time with everyone at work, nearly more time than you're spending with your family. So that's sort of, you've got to have it like that really good balance, and sort of people, get the young guys, 20 odds, to be able to understand that you can't be like that with the ladies, like people, you can't just sort of say this and think that they're going to shrug it off the shoulders, and then, different sensitivity and things like that. So,
Yeah, and they also say that you can reduce the amount of conflict in your team just by getting to, like, I guess, ensuring that everyone understands each other. Get them to know each other a little bit better, ask a few more questions, understand their background and so forth. And then what happens is you don't have these assumptions, oh, that person is ignoring me for whatever reason. Maybe they're actually just busy at that point in time, or they're thinking about something else, so the assumptions get reduced because you know each other that much better. And if you create a culture, which sounds like you are, of people understanding each other, there's going to be a lot less conflict and probably more harmonious kind of environment.
Yeah. And like, I'll go in, you sort of might go, whoa, something's happened. Like, you can just feel that there's something in the air, and it's like, and my sort of thing, I would just say, right, who ran over their kitten? Like, that's my saying, like, who ran over their cat today? Because it looks like, there's not, something's wrong. So I'm sort of, and you need someone to come in, they might, everyone's sort of like, oh, why is that person not talking to me? They're just sort of, but then you sort of, hey, what's the wrong? And it's like, oh, like, ran over my cat, or like, my grandma's sick or something like that. So it's like, okay, well, maybe you should come and say that to me. So then when everyone knows that, hey, Bob's not feeling well today, or Bob's just a little bit sort of down, and that's sort of, so everyone understands, rather than just sort of thinking, oh, what the hell's wrong with Bob? Why is he ignoring us today? So that's sort of, it's getting people to come to you and explain, which can be hard for them as well. So it's sort of, yeah,
I think that's such a good example, and it has come up in a couple of other interviews around making sure that you are, being aware of the surroundings and picking up on those cues, because they're there and they can be quite obvious if you know your people well, and if you know how your environment works. Like you say, you can walk into the shop and instantly that something's happened. Like, that's great to be able to do it. And the good thing about it is you go in and you deal with it as soon as you can, because I'm assuming that vibe can then carry on to what the customers experience as well.
Oh, and that's it. And then it can fester very quickly. We're very close in quarters, and that's the thing. So you've got to nip it in the butt. And sometimes I used to sort of just let it sort of flow on and hope it would go. But if I'm not there as much, or I'm in the office as more, you're not on the floor, then you've got to make sure that it's this harmonious sort of, that's this. People are sort of doing it, or you might just sort of say, hey, why don't you go and work in the other room today? Or it's a big sort of bit of a juggling thing. And and
it's not something that you want to avoid. Like you say, that festering can go on for a lot longer. It's much harder to come back from.
And then someone might say something that they didn't actually mean to say, and then it sort of blows up in that. So I think I think for like management side of things, like when you go into, I've got some friends that are, building up and they're going up into being, trying to own a store in the foodstuffs brands, which would be absolutely amazing. But the steps you've got to go through, so sort of big in that. But then they've always, as the bigger this sort of company, you've got the HR there, you've got all these implements behind. So I think for me, for being well, even though we are a small business, but we aren't. It's sort of you haven't got all those policies and all the procedures behind you, or someone to fall back on and say, hey, all right, go and see Debbie at HR. She's going to sort this out. It's Rueben. But so I think that's to be able to have something that can help, like whether it's a flow system or something like that can help sort of smaller businesses. I think that would be is very helpful. That I'd find that helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure there's tons out there, like of different things that are going on. But one of the things that I found, even when we're doing research on Manager IQ, is that people don't know where to go to for help, so it's a big bad world. And I shouldn't say big, a big fantastic world out there of things that you can Google and things that you've got access to now and so forth. But you don't know the wood from the tree sometimes. And, and then you have to do research and then you go down some rabbit warrens. So sometimes it's an access issue. They don't know if that's the right thing for them. So something to think about.
Yeah.
I feel like there actually is a lot of crossovers between your environment and the corporate world, Rueben. It's fascinating, even though maybe the language is slightly different. I think the concepts are there, but like you've answered a lot of the kind of key questions that we're going to ask just organically through the conversation, which is perfect. But before we go, would you have any, I guess, hot tips for any managers and leaders out there to help them as they transition into management or even as they grow as a manager?
I would say another thing. It was always question. You're better off to ask a silly question than do a silly thing. That sort of say to my guys, you never stop learning as well. So you always sort of come and ask a question, because if you which can be hard, because then you might be feeling that you don't actually know the answer, and then maybe you shouldn't be in that management role. But if you don't stop asking, then you're not going to carry on learning. Like, you always pick up on different things. And I think with the way that the social is now, like, it's really good. Like, on Instagram, you sort of like, I did a podcast with a butcher in Australia the other day, and it's you're learning from them, and I'll pick up ideas from them. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you're in management, always go and speak to someone, like reach out to somebody else, or whether it's through social, or wherever it is, or ask your boss to sort of going along, because that's the biggest thing, that you just don't stop asking questions. That's sort of my first thing. Don't sort of like push it down inside yourself, because then it is going to fester in yourself, and then you'll feel that your ability isn't good. But then it is there. You wouldn't be have been given a management position if you weren't management material. So that's just the thing. Like, that's I think it's sort of, if you've got that job, then that's the job that and everyone is great. Like, as we sort of said, you don't have bad managers. It's just like, actually, you might be a sort of the upper level might be bad or something. So reach out to the sideways or something like that. So
Yeah. No, it was something we talked about in our pre-chat around, you were quite fortunate with the fact that you had a boss that inspired you, and it's impacted in the way that you help your apprentices and so forth. But what happens with managers who maybe had people like in front of them, or in upper management, that maybe weren't practicing in a way that they felt where they were comfortable with, or wanted to role model in the same way? And I think it's great advice that you give there, that go out, go to other people within your organization if you have them, go to other butchers, talk to other different people. One thing I found through Manager IQ, just people are so keen to talk to you and share their experience. And, I think inherent as part of human nature, I think we do want to help each other. And so just being a little bit bold, I think, by, going out and putting yourself out there, you're going to gain a lot. And because I agree, with every conversation, you always learn something.
And that's the thing. Well, we started a thing, it sort of got put on hold with this whole COVID last 2 years, but it was called Beers and Ideas. So we had like people like, and that's what I've always sort of said, is that I might be, what I'm sort of doing is, as a butcher in a retail shop, is you can get help from someone that's in a new world or a countdown. So it's the industry can come together, and you don't have to just be people always just sort of think, oh, they're my competition. They don't help. But like literally, that's why I went down and I helped a guy down the road, 500 meters down the road, when my shop was shut. I went and he reached out to me because he didn't have any butchers that could cut on the bandsaw. So he's theoretically my competition in the local New World. I went and cut all the stuff because he needed someone on the bandsaw. So and that sort of, it's all good sort of will that like that sort of comes around. So I think you can reach out to all different industries as well. Like it doesn't just have to be like sort of narrow-minded. Take those blinkers off, because then if you have those off, you'll see around, not just forward.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. And I just love that you did that, just went and helped out wherever you can. And, I've always been quite, I've grown up in my HR career, and I've always been passionate about my profession as well, and about helping each other out, and, just elevating the profession in itself. And I feel like you've got the same sentiment through through the whole butcher's world.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's just sort of say it swings to roundabouts. See someone hops on it, will go up. It's all fair and games.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You should say that, because it also it can come back in the most unusual ways. The good I guess role that you've put out there into the world. I've been very surprised around just helping someone because I thought it was the right thing to do, and then suddenly something else would happen, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's the good karma, I guess. That's kind of back. So it's amazing how that energy could be put out into the world and what will come back to you.
That's it. So yeah, that's what I've definitely sort of learned through over the years, from my personal sort of life. It's sort of when you sort of incorporate that into the work life that it does. It's I definitely believe in karma. Like if you help, if you help someone, then it'll come back, and it might not be straight away, but then all of a sudden, I've had that. Like I was helping out with people, and then I've had people contact me and sort of saying, hey, we want to buy our meat off you because you've done this. So it's good. Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Rueben, I've had such a fantastic time getting to learn a little bit more in your industry and how it resonates in the kind of the world of managers. Like I said earlier, I think there's heaps of great crossover, but thank you so much for your time. I'll make sure that we put your link in so that everyone can, if anyone would like to contact you or have a conversation with you about your experience, they can do. But thank you so much for joining. I think it was fantastic.
Excellent. Cheers.